Well, welcome everybody to our November edition of the Cal4 Access and Stewardship meeting. Thank you all for coming. We have a lot to cover tonight in regard to two important topics. The first one being the ongoing but almost over saga of the solar development that's being placed next to the Prairie City State Vehicular Recreation Area, or SVRA. That is really coming to a head, and we'll wrap up as far as our public involvement within a week. So we'll focus on that primarily. And then yesterday, public comments were due with the deadline for comments on the proposed rescission of the BLM's Conservation and Landscape Health Rule. And that one's a pretty big deal. So I'm going to share some information on what our prospects are looking like for next steps, as hopefully they do approve rescinding, but there are other actions that can be taken in addition to or instead of rescission, however they move forward. So we'll dive into that. But to start with Prairie City, give me a quick raise of hands from everybody here. Let's see, I know Chris and Oli are really familiar with the Prairie City situation. Stephen and Gary, do you have much background on that particular topic?
Not very much, just what I've read on the website. I'm kind of new to this whole game, but I know about it. But as far as all of what's been going on, only what I've read basically on the Cal4 site.
Okay, thanks. And Gary, I know we've chatted about it a little bit, but since you are from back east, I'm assuming that perhaps you've not taken a deep dive into it yet. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's accurate, Rose. I just know what we've talked about. I think I kind of bumped into your last meeting where you talked about the solar development. And then I think, you touched on it briefly at NAMRAC. That's all I know about it. I've never been to that area in all of my adventures out west. So, just trying to learn.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay, well then I'll give a little bit more detail as we're going through it for Stephen and Gary. And Gary, next time you're out in California, I totally recommend going to Prairie City because it's not too far from Sacramento. I know you go through there often anyway. And I think you and Robin would totally love it. So this will be a good overview of that particular park, which hopefully isn't endangered in its future based on what we're doing here. So let me share my screen then and jump into some stuff about Prairie City. Okay, so hopefully now you all are seeing the action alert from the Cal4 website. This is the most recent action alert that gives an overview of all the different issues that are impacting Prairie City SVRA because of the solar development. So this photo for Stephen and Gary is actually one of the artist's renderings in the environmental impact report that shows what the landscape will look like as you're looking out from Prairie City into where the solar development will be placed. And this is really just a small fraction of the landscape because the total project will cover 2,700 acres. There is some open space that's been planned in between the panels in like little strips. So overall, the footprint will cover over 1,400 acres of actual panels, but there's other infrastructures like these switch yards, as well as the massive battery storage containers, a substation, and other infrastructure. So within that 2,700 acres, there's a little bit less that's not actually developed, but most of it will look like these panels. And for comparison, I think many of us are probably familiar with the Ivanpah solar project that's out by the California-Nevada border. I know for anybody that was just at SEMA, you have to drive past it if you're coming from California into Las Vegas. And that is one example of a solar project gone completely wrong. It has recently just been completely abandoned because it's never reached profitability in all the years that they've tried to keep that thing going. There's a lot of other issues with Ivanpah, so I'm not going to compare that as apples to apples with this project. But when you're thinking just about the footprint of the landscape, there are 173,000 solar panels in the Ivanpah project. And that covers about, well, it actually covers about 3,000 acres. It's a much bigger space with fewer panels that are spread out in like dispersed smaller developments. But this project will have over 400,000 panels. That's over twice as many and in a more condensed footprint within that 2,700 acres. So basically, we're going to be looking at a whole sea of solar panels when we're looking south and east from the borders of Prairie City.
Can I ask a second? In that rendering that you say that's the artist rendering, is that road right next to it? Is that White Rock Road, or is that just an access road into it? Do you know?
You know, offhand, Stephen, I'm not sure if this is showing White Rock or Scott Road or another road. White Rock Road is the main road that goes by that development on the west side. And I don't believe there's any main roads through the other pieces of the property because it is out in a rural area. I think it's other ranch lands that border on the other sides. So
Gotcha.
I'm going to assume this is likely White Rock, but I don't want to say that definitively.
Because I drive that road frequently, and matter of fact, I just by there a couple of weeks ago, and thinking about how much of that they were going to consume with that solar farm.
Yeah, you will be looking at a sea of solar panels from White Rock Road. So this again is just kind of a snippet of what the whole project will look like, but it gives us an idea of the scale. So as you're reading through this, I give an overview of some of the major issues. Something that we need to keep in mind is that the project is not only adjacent to Prairie City, there's also elements of it that are going to encroach into the SVRA itself. So that 1.3 mile gen tie line, which is like the giant cables that connect the battery storage and the power generation to the Sacramento Municipal Utility District grid, the generation tie lines are going to run along a 1.3 mile stretch that is actually inside the border of Prairie City. And State Parks is evaluating whether or not to grant an easement for that gen tie line to the project developer. Probably their decision to grant or not grant that easement is dependent on whether or not the project is approved by Sacramento County. It had been my hope that State Parks would put a much more firm stance on that and just outright deny the easement because there's no requirement that they need to do it. However, they've not stated that definitively, and in all the advocacy that we've done so far, I have to assume that they are very much strongly entertaining that possibility. There's a lot of other impacts to the park, though, one of those being traffic and access conflicts. There's a number of public safety hazards that are presented because we'll have a shared access road from White Rock going into the solar development that will run along that gen tie line. So the southern border of Prairie City SVRA will be the access route to the project, or the primary access route. And I know Oli has done some really great research on the safety hazards. A piece of the environmental impact analysis that was incredibly insufficient was analysis of traffic conflicts and safety hazards. And so that's something that I'm writing about at length within the Cal4 comment that I'll be submitting on this project before the Board of Supervisors meeting next week. But that's something that I think for anybody that lives in the area like you, Stephen, or who frequents Prairie City is of chief concern, because when you think about having these massive construction vehicles during the whole construction phase, they're going to be hauling materials in, hauling out dirt. They're removing like 1.3 million tons of dirt from the site after they do all the blasting and leveling. And so there's 600 trucks that are going to be used daily. Excuse me, I might be misquoting that. There's a high number of trucks that are going to be daily going in and out to remove that material. Again, also bringing material in for building infrastructure. And White Rock Road doesn't have stoplights or other existing infrastructure to provide safe passage for people that are going up and down that road. It's a main commuter thoroughfare with people that are entering and exiting the park. So we already have some traffic issues that come into play at Prairie City, and this is only going to significantly exacerbate that further. Another big safety hazard is the whole issue of light and glare that will create safety hazards for riders within the park, because we have this big sea of nearly 500,000. They've reduced the number from being actually 500,000 panels to being just over 400,000 panels. So that's still a lot. And those panels are going to be moving with the sun throughout the day, and they will many times be casting light and glare, really intense light from the surface of the panels into the direction of the park. And there's no way to stop that light from its pathway. And that creates some significant safety hazards, especially for riders who are up on any of the elevated hill terrain within the park. Interestingly, one of the highest elevated parts in the park is the SVRA's kids track. And so we had spoken to this and requested that they do some more analysis on the issue of light and glare being cast into the park as a whole, as well as specifically for the kids track, and that wasn't completed. So that's another big piece of the analysis that was just significantly insufficient. And then some other big issues include economic impacts. There is insufficient economic analysis, and Prairie City is actually a pretty big contributor to revenue for Sacramento County. Right now, it adds 59 million every year to the local economy. 9 million of that is just tax revenue, and it supports 385 jobs. So that's a pretty big economic footprint. In comparison, the solar project will add 67 million in tax revenue every 20 years. So when you think about the tax revenue alone from Prairie City as compared to the solar project, it's not even comparable. Prairie City contributes so much more. That's upwards of 3 times the amount over a 20-year period. Plus, the solar project will bring an initial surge of jobs to the area for the construction of the project. But after construction, it will employ less than 10 people annually. And out of those 10 people, most of them will only be present for a cyclical basis for cleaning and maintenance of the panels. So only a handful of people are actually employed continually to support the ongoing operation of this project. And when you think about that in comparison to placing 385 jobs at risk due to the degraded value of what the whole rider experience will be at Prairie City after this solar development is put in, that again it's not even comparable one to the other. And then we spoke at length during the draft environmental impact report comment period about conflicts of operations between dust and water usage, water availability. Also, there was some significant failure to fulfill legal requirements. We'll be speaking to that again in our comment on the final environmental impact report. And so I have some more details below that I'll go into on those issues. But another one that we've all taken really keen note to is the habitat destruction, because this particular area is actually one of the last really pristine, intact oak woodlands in Sacramento County. And there's multiple species of oaks that are contained within the project footprint. One of those, though, is blue oaks. And blue oaks are actually increasingly rare. They only populate about 8% of our state, and they also only exist in California. So when we're thinking about conservation issues, and we're always in Cal4 looking at OHV access as something that needs to be balanced between, great recreation access with conservation of resources. This particular project just represents a complete disregard for the destruction of habitat that will be required in order to implement the project. And it's kind of shocking because we've been so limited, self-limited in what we've done for expansions and development at Prairie City, specifically for the purpose of preserving the natural resources in that area. This area is full of vernal pools, and there's a watershed running through there from Coyote Creek that flows out and around Prairie City. There's a lot of wetland species that require and rely on this habitat in that foothill region, as well as a lot of migrating species that kind of move back and forth from the higher mountains to the foothills through this exact area. And these oak woodlands are the habitat that they depend upon in that migratory pathway. So we're also very concerned about the habitat destruction, not only for the habitat itself, but also because for every level of increased impact to the land around Prairie City, we will experience an increased pressure for conservation of natural resources within Prairie City. Because of the way that California Public Resource Code is written, our motorized recreation areas are held to a really high standard, actually at a higher standard than other state parks for evidence of outcomes in conservation of natural resources. And that's why we have our SVRA general plans, our wildlife habitat protection plans, the soil conservation plans, and other measures that are specifically for resource conservation. So whenever we have increased impacts around an SVRA, we have increased pressure for conservation within the SVRA. And that's a real concern to us because we already are holding ourselves to a very steep standard in keeping that balance of conservation of resources with recreational access. And so the only thing that we could see with increased pressure is having to sacrifice more recreational access in order to elevate conservation measures if that increased pressure is directed at us specifically. So this article gives a rundown of those concerns. There's some additional concerns I have listed here, and then our call to action. And that's what I want to focus on in our call tonight is we are looking forward to the Sacramento County Board of Supervisors meeting on November 18th at 9:30 a.m., where they actually have this topic on their agenda to review and consider approving the solar projects for implementation. They'll make their decision on this day. And so what I'm hoping many of our members will do is either send letters to the Board of Supervisors to express your concerns, or attend the Sacramento County Board of Supervisors meeting to give public comment, or both. Would be amazing if you're able to do both. So if you're not in the area, at least sending a letter. And if you're in the area or can commute to the area on the 18th, send a letter and show up to give public comment, or even just show up to sit in the room. If you're not comfortable standing up and speaking, that's understandable. I know, it's a mixed bag, and I actually still get nervous when I have to stand up and give public comment. So I don't want to assume everybody's just comfortable with it. But if you can even come to be present, then having that physical presence is really visibly impactful for the board. And then if you're feeling comfortable to give public comment on top of that, then that increases the impact further. For anybody who's considering public comment, I can provide you with something to say. I have a lot of snippets already written out that make it easier for somebody just to stand up and read some content that's relevant without having to think through what they might craft for themselves, or maybe that could allay some of the nervousness for folks that don't love standing up and speaking in public. So if you're considering attending and you'd like to have something pre-written for you, I have a bunch of stuff ready to go, and I'd be happy to hand that over to you. So here we have our list of actions that we're calling on the Board of Supervisors to complete instead of approving the meeting, or approving the the project for implementation. And that's what it is. So there's some more information here that is given in the sample letter template. So I'm just going to click over to that. And let me know if my screen changes with you. Sometimes when I'm on Zoom and I click from link to link, it switches with me, and sometimes it doesn't. So are you now seeing a document for the Coyote Creek email campaign? Yeah, okay, thanks for confirming, Chris. So this letter template is intended to hopefully make it super easy, quick and easy for you to write a letter. These are all the people that we're targeting our email campaign to, primarily, of course, to the Board of Supervisors, but we're also directing our emails to the county CEO and SMUD, the Sacramento Municipal Utility District, because they're the utility provider that would be purchasing the power that's generated from the solar plant. We are also directing our letters, including them in the email recipients, to the California State Parks OHMBR division and the commission. All those people will receive it through this email here, because there's elements in which there was not, the cooperation between agencies is not fulfilled. And so Sacramento County should have held a public hearing with the OHMBR Commission, and also should have had more public cooperation with state parks that involved stakeholders like us, the users of Prairie City, and that was not fulfilled. And so we want to call all of our concerns to the attention of state parks and the OHMBR division as well. So to make it easy, I've combined all these email addresses just in one segment, so you can do a quick copy and paste, throw everybody's email address in your to line. And then I'm asking everybody if you would also copy me as a CC. I'm collecting everybody's letters. I'm going to print them out and take them as like a visible stack to show the supervisors, and provide them with copies at the hearing next week. And so that's another, again, just layer of tangible impact to show how many people are concerned about this. So if you feel so inclined, please copy me on your emails as well.
Are you asking us to send? Are you asking us to send one of your letters to each one of these individually, or to send them as a group? How do you like that to work?
Yeah, you can send it as a group. If you want to send them individually, that's fine, but you can send it as a group. That's why I put everybody here together as a copy paste. It doesn't hurt, and in fact, in some ways, I think it can be helpful for them to see that you are outreaching everybody. And so that would be one strategy to condense your time. If you want to send them individually, I have seen that some supervisors have responded. And to that point, I believe most of the responses have come when they've been individually addressed. So that's another tactic to take if you choose. Knowing the timeline between now and the 18th is short, I'm not sure how many more personalized responses we'll be getting from the supervisors and others. So, you know, at your discretion, I think either strategy has its pros. You can choose which one feels best for you.
Well, I'd like to get all of my club members involved in this. I mean, we have 60 club members, and we could probably get at least half of them to actively participate if it was structured so that it was basically very simple for them to do. Maybe I need to talk to you individually, and you can coach me on that, because to get the individual member rather than just having, I was thinking I could submit a letter with everybody's signature on it, but I think you'd have more impact if you could get everybody to individually send a letter.
Yeah, Stephen, what I recommend is write one letter with everybody as a club and set it as your club submission, and then also have your club members write individual letters.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we've had another club do that, and I think it's a really great strategy. Okay.
I will try and contact you in the next day or so, and you can walk me through that maybe.
Yeah, Stephen, let's connect on that. We'll work it all out together.
Okay, thank you.
You got it. Okay, so here then we have some more talking points. Of course, I have kind of an abbreviated rundown in the article on the Cal4 website, but here there's many pages of additional detail. So you can pick and choose which items, you know, speak to you, resonate with your particular concerns and situation. You can speak to them all or to some of them. And there may be additional issues that are not named here that you can think of as, you know, a local resident and user at Prairie City, Stephen. You might have other things that come to mind beyond what I've articulated here. But this gives, you know, quite a bit of rundown. I won't read through it all because this is accessible online, so you can check it out after the meeting. But it culminates in the sample email template, which this can make it easy for you just to copy and paste it into a Word document or into an email, whatever you're choosing to do. there's some kind of templated language and then also some suggestions that are highlighted in yellow for other things that you might speak to in different components of your letter. So it rounds out with just in closing, what we're asking the Board of Supervisors to do, which is not to approve the SEIR and deny approval of the project altogether. So you can use that verbatim or you can customize it and putting it in your own words. I've seen some people use ChatGPT to rewrite it and just kind of give a different flavor to that content while still conveying the same message. Those tactics can be useful, but if you're customizing these other parts and then using templated language, that's also okay, because we do want to have some customization at minimum, and this will provide that. If you want to customize it further, then that's great. Go for it. That takes it a step further. So let me pause there and just ask if folks have questions about the email letter writing campaign or any of the pieces that you might be speaking to within that.
You answered all my questions when I interrupted you, so sorry for the interruption.
No, that's what these meetings are for. Please jump in anytime.
So Rose, I'll have access to these documents in a link form or something so I can open them and spend more time reading them?
Yes. In fact, I'm going to go back to our website here and I'm going to quick stop screen sharing so I can get over to the chat. And I'll put this in the chat here for you right now.
Okay.
And then you can, as you saw, the sample letter template and all the talking points, the email addresses, those are all within, that's a link that's within this site that I posted here. Oli, you had something to share?
Yeah, Rose, you know that my main concern is the document itself and the transportation issue. The fact that they left White Rock Road completely out of the draft. There was a comment made by Park and Rec. It should have been picked up and put in the final. They never did that. On the way to Vegas, I actually had to pull off the side of the road below Baker when I could find a off-road, because I had a gal call me up. She's in the Senate Environmental Quality Committee, and I went over all my concerns. She couldn't give me legal advice, but she said I was butting on everything that I was going through. And she actually said that if I went to my assemblywoman and found some legal authority that would, take this up, she would be available to them. So I think I'm on the right path on this particular issue. I'm going to try to get them to not approve the final impact report because it's flawed and it's inadequate, completely inadequate. It's in violation of CEQA guideline section 15125. My goal is to get an entry into the park that's safe. Right now, it is absolutely not safe. I know of a person who's worked there for, let's say, over 5 years. He comes down that road from the Sacramento side. There are times when he does not even turn in. He goes all the way down to Prairie City Road, makes a legal U-turn at the signal, and comes back. Now, I know they're going to move that one power pole. They've already agreed to do that. But even so, that still doesn't, that intersection is, someone's going to get hurt, and the document does not address it. At the planning commission meeting, staff told them that MMTC3 was going to take care of it. But the mitigation measure isn't supposed to identify the impact. The impact is supposed to be identified in the impact report and guide the mitigation measure to look into that particular issue. So the document is flawed. It's inadequate. It's flawed. And that's my goal, is to try to get them to not approve the document.
Yeah. Well, Ole, I think that you hit something spot on in speaking to the traffic issues. You really did that so well at the Planning Commission meeting, and hopefully you may be coming back for the Board of Supervisors meeting to do the same. But if you have an inroad with somebody who's interested in taking this up at the assembly level with some legal backing, then I would really urge you to pursue that, and I'd be happy to jump in and support or partner with you, help out in any way possible. I'm looking at other legal avenues, but I think going through the assembly could really elevate the impact of compelling the board maybe just not to approve this at all.
My local assemblywoman in the local office was a waste of time, but I contacted the Sacramento office, and she put me in touch with the Assembly National Resources Committee, a guy named Lawrence Slingbaum. I sent him my information, and he just said, well, there's only 4 in their office. They don't have time to look at individual stuff and like that. And then when I went back to this Linda Rios, which is a consultant in the Assembly Local Government Committee, she put me in touch with this Bryn Cook, who was really, really helpful. And you know, I went over how I thought the process works, from draft to comment to final, and how this didn't do that. And she says I was spot on everything I was saying. And I actually sent her that last, attachment that I gave you, pointing out everywhere that it was wrong. So, I mean, we'll find out next week, if they're going to approve a document that really shouldn't be approved.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you also, Ole, for doing all that extra outreach to the assembly representatives. I'd love to follow up with you and talk about that further and see what kind of action they're thinking about.
Well, I don't think my assembly woman is going to go for it, because the contact that I finally got in the SAC office, she told me I should talk to the assembly member of that area, of the Prairie City area, that they really don't cross over into each other's area. But that's typical for politics and this particular assemblywoman that I have now. I mean, to me, she's useless. But so I don't see me getting anywhere with that. All I can do is hope that the Board of Supervisors will realize that the document, I think the document can be challenged in a court of law real easy. I just don't have the money to do it. And I was hoping maybe your buddy Sean might be interested in doing that with the Sierra Club.
Well, yeah, if this is approved, there will be some legal activity to follow. I'll just say that right now. But our goal is to compel the board not to approve it, because we would not want to have to go through the time and expense of having to litigate this in court. But really, the document is not legally defensible. And so that's what we're trying to help the Board of Supervisors to see, is that it is so flawed that they cannot in good conscience, nor in legal parameters, approve this without having repercussions follow.
Well, I plan on telling them next Tuesday that the document cares more about the loss of view shed on Scott Road than it cares about the loss of life on White Rock Road.
That's a good way to put it. Yes.
Because it mentions the loss of view shed on Scott Road. And that's the only road that it mentions for transportation entrance and into the construction project.
Yeah, that will be the main entrance and exit for all construction. That's why. So yeah, traffic is a major issue that does need to be spoken to. So if you can include that in your comment letter, I would encourage, again, email a comment letter before the 18th, and then also go to the meeting to provide spoken public comment, because that way they're getting both layers. You have to think about, from the Board of Supervisors perspective, they don't actually read everything. Like the final impact report is altogether over 1,000 pages. When you have the actual environmental impact report, plus all the appendices, plus all the comments to the draft environmental impact report, everything stacked together is such a massive amount of content. They usually rely on having a member of their staff read it or skim it and give them summaries. So they're usually not super well versed in this. And we've been meeting individually with each board of supervisor over the last couple of weeks to have one-to-one conversations with them. And I think that's been helpful, but my biggest takeaway from all those meetings is that even a week prior to their hearing, every single one of them is still saying, well, when I read through it, then I can take these things that you're sharing into consideration. So a week before they haven't even begun reading it. I don't anticipate then that they're going to read all of our comment letters, but we need to write lengthy specific comment letters so that if they do read them, they're really understanding where concerns lie. That's pointing directly to the flaws within the environmental impact report. And they're also seeing that volume of comments in opposition stack and stack and stack on top of each other. So emailing and speaking at the meeting are really the best tactics that we can take.
Do those emails that we're sending, do they become public record?
Yes, and that's another piece of it is because we're anticipating that if this project is approved, there will be litigation to follow. All of this helps us to build our administrative record to take into court and follow through on that pathway if we need to.
Thank you.
Yeah, great feedback, Ollie. And again, thank you so much. I've so appreciated all of your involvement with this throughout the last several months. Okay, well, there's a couple other things that I wanted to share with you. So I'm going to hop over to another site real quick and share my screen again. Okay, so now you should be seeing the Sacramento County Planning Environmental Review site for Coyote Creek Agrivoltaic Ranch. This is actually the official name of the project. So if you want to receive email updates, you can sign up for them there. But this is a resource where you can get all the official information about what the county has presented for the scope of the project. If you read through all this, you'll note that there's some very misrepresented and misleading information that becomes clear when you start to dive into the actual environmental impact report. The whole complete document is there. And then it's also broken down by segment. And then below that, you can see comments on the draft environmental impact report, as well as the response to comments. And so it's a lot of reading. Like I said, there's many hundreds of pages altogether. I think it's well over 1,000. But if you're wanting to dive in on any specific topic, like here, Oli, they have a chapter on traffic and circulation. And then if you go into the response to public comments, you can do some searching and find comments that address traffic specifically and see how the county has responded to that. I'll just say from the outset that the responses I've seen from the county have been pretty lackluster on all topics, but as we're crafting our comments for the board's consideration, those are things that we can speak to further illustrate how their analysis and total considered impacts has been completely insufficient. So this is another resource to use. You can also go back and see the draft EIR. It's also broken down as a complete document or all the different components. So this gives you the whole history of projects. But of course, what we're commenting on right now is the final version, the FEIR, and everything that includes. And then we also have this great website that, as you all know, I've been collaborating really closely with some unlikely partners in the environmentalist realm who are also very strongly opposed to this project. And that includes ECOS, who's shown here, the Environmental Council of Sacramento, as well as the Sierra Club, Defenders of Wildlife, the California Native Plant Society, and a few other environmental organizations. The Center for Biological Diversity has also taken interest in this and maybe joining in different capacities as we're moving forward from here. So having such a strong opposition from the environmental community has been surprising, but also I think a great illustration of why this project is so wrong. So if you wanted to see some more detail about impacts, there's of course a lot of information that goes into the trees, because again, this is a really rare oak woodland that would be just completely obliterated in the process of constructing the project. And over here, this is another one of the artist renderings from the SVRA showing what the landscape will look like after they put up all these panels. And then they have their own action alert, which has an angle more so from the natural resource impacts versus, you know, our action alert is primarily focused on impacts to Prairie City. We also, of course, speak to some of the natural resources, but it's those combination of issues that are so significant as we're looking at this. And so if you want to take a look at that, you can get a lot more information here about the oak trees as well as species impacts, the very insufficient analysis that was done on endangered species and species of concern by the Department of Fish and Game, or the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, and vernal pools, migratory and other birds, as well as, you know, the other rare and important natural resources in the area. So I will also put a link to this in the chat box, and a couple things I just wanted to note for you to take a look at specifically is these links to the social media channels and posts that have been done, including an article that was written up in the Sacramento Bee about this project, where we've had some pretty prominent voices in the world of conservation speak out in opposition because of how devastating this project will be on the area and the natural resources. So this is another great item to consider as you're thinking about writing your comments and putting together comments to speak to at the Board of Supervisors meeting. So I'm going to put that link there in the chat. And that sums up what I want to share about Prairie City. You know, all in all, it's an appeal to you to get involved, write a letter. I'm so excited to hear, Stephen, that you're asking your club to write letters also. I know Chris, that Santa Rosa 4x4 has been taking a really hard look at this. So thank you to yourself and Mark and Eric, who have really been great about compelling people to get involved. So I've seen some letters come through. I've been copied on several letters since your club has taken an interest in this, and I know that that's been really impactful, so I appreciate it. Any other questions or thoughts on Prairie City? Okay, well then the last thing I wanted to chat about, Gary, did you have something? No, okay. The last thing I want to mention is that we do have the recent closure of the comment period for the rescission of the BLM's Conservation and Landscape Health Rule. And I'm going to pause here because I do this every time. I had my screen all set up with everything that I wanted to share, so I wouldn't have to go back to it. And then I accidentally closed some of those windows by mistake. So let me navigate back to them. So the Conservation and Landscape Health Rule, some of you all may remember from 2023, we had an action alert at that time because the proposed rule would allow the Bureau of Land Management to sell parcels of our public lands as conservation leases. And that is completely illegal, as well as, completely destructive to the whole purpose of our public lands, which is public access and multiple use sustained yield. Those are the concepts within the confines of what the Bureau of Land Management is allowed to manage the land for. They're not permitted to manage their lands solely for conservation or to privatize public lands in any way, shape, or form. So this rule basically did both. It elevated conservation to its own unique use, thereby eradicating other uses and destroying the multiple use objective. And it also introduced privatization of our public lands by selling parcels as leases. Really, even though they're named leases, the sales would be potentially permanent because none of the language within the rule indicated any kind of term or expiration date for those leases. They could be renewed indefinitely. So let me just open up a couple more documents here. Okay, I think I've got my screen ready now. So I put out an action alert to ask folks to write letters for the comment period that again was closed yesterday. And if you wanted to have some more information just to kind of refresh yourself on this topic, you can go to that area of our website, see a quick rundown of all the major areas of concern, and then see a breakdown of what we were commenting on and that structure. You can also then follow up with considering outreach through our support for the West Act. And so I'm going to share my screen again here. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm clicking around too much. Let me try this one more time. Okay, the West Act was actually introduced after the BLM approved the Conservation and Landscape Health Rule in 2024. So we had a comment period on it in 2023, and then the BLM went ahead and approved it in 24. And so at this time, the BLM actually has authorized themselves to sell public land in the form of these conservation leases. There's a number of other elements of the Conservation and Landscape Health Rule that are really severely concerning. One is that it dramatically expands the designation of areas of critical environmental concern, which is basically wilderness laundering. The ACECs that we've seen implemented in the past, and especially recently, have been so restrictive in their conservation requirements that those areas essentially become wilderness without having to go through Congress for a wilderness designation. So that was the intended purpose of expanding ACECs. And when you read the language of the Conservation Health Rule, it becomes obvious. The rule also created an illegal element of operation for the BLM in that it allows them to raise revenue for the government through the sale of leases. And the BLM and every other federal agency, they're forbidden to raise revenue. The only way that the government can raise revenue is unfortunately through taxes. But fortunately, agencies are forbidden to raise revenue themselves, because if that were the case, we would be taxed multiple times over through all these different facets of government operation on top of taxes. So we have protection from overbearing taxation because of the restriction to agencies that they cannot raise revenue. And so the BLM basically disregarded that congressional directive and gave themselves permission to raise revenue in this manner. So that needs to be corrected. And while the current proposal to rescind this rule has been brought forth by the Bureau of Land Management themselves, when you read through the description of why they proposed the rescission, it's because the leadership under the prior White House administration was really just operating in opposition to our national laws. and disregarding them through a number of actions, including the passage of this conservation and landscape health rule. So the current administration is correcting some of those overreaches of authority through rescinding rules that were implemented over the last few years. And so this is one of them. It's one of the biggest ones, actually. But if the BLM rescinds it now, it temporarily takes it away, but it is not a permanent solution, in that a future White House administration could just revive this rule and reapprove it. And so as we have, different administrations come and go in the White House, that's part of living in a constitutional republic. Many people call our nation a democracy, but it's actually not. We are a constitutional republic because we are a government by the people, a republic with a constitution that governs how we govern by the people, for the people. And so within the structure of a constitutional republic, we elect different presidential entities every 4 years, and those representations may change, and that's how it should be. However, with that change in representation, we see these pretty dramatic shifts now in how different leaders will treat and act upon existing laws. And so even though we're seeing some correction of prior overreach of authority in our current administration, we have to anticipate that future administrations may choose to go back to policies and rulemaking that, again, implements overreach of their authority. So it's great that we might see the rule rescinded now, but that's not the permanent fix. What the permanent fix is to have legislation passed through Congress that would forbid in explicit detail any rulemaking like this in the future. And that could be accomplished through the West Act, which actually has been proposed and is live in our current legislative session. And this is an item that we want to encourage our congressional and Senate representatives to co-sponsor and sign on to support. So I have this document, which I'll upload into our chat because it is not live on our website yet. This is a piece that will be forthcoming, but we can start taking action on it now. And the talking points give a whole rundown of many of the issues that I spoke to, as well as more. It names the two legislative bills that are in process. One is in the Senate, one is in our House of Representatives. So you'll see those bill numbers there. They both fall under the West Act. And then it gives the contact information for everybody that we would want to call to urge them to support this particular legislation. When it goes on our website, I will have an email template to accompany this, so that we'll have both a call and a letter writing campaign active. I'm still in the process of putting that together, so that will be shortly forthcoming. But in the meantime, we can definitely get started with calls. So there is there's a lot of people that we could potentially call. So if you feel so compelled, making a call a day would be tremendously impactful to help us bring this to the attention of our legislative representatives, as well as, ensure that they're aware of the fact that rescinding the rule is not the permanent fix. In some ways, we have to educate our representatives on how they can best represent us. And many times they may have partial information about different pieces of the concerns that we raise. And one element I've seen as a commonality is that not everybody understands that rescinding the BLM rule is actually a temporary solution, whereas the West Act would provide the permanent solution. So requesting your advocacy there as well. Does anybody have questions or thoughts on the BLM Conservation and Landscape Health Rule or the West Act?
That document that you've been showing us on your screen share, is that on our website, or is that what you said is not there yet?
It's not there yet, Stephen. So I'm going to upload this into our chat box. In fact, I'll do that now while we're talking, because it's not yet live on the website, but it will be soon. you're getting a sneak peek.
So that's federal legislation, the West Act, or it's a California legislation?
This is federal, Gary.
Okay.
Yeah, because the Conservation and Landscape Health Rule impacts the entire nation. And so in this document that I uploaded, you'll see that I have national representatives for everybody that sits in the natural resource, I'm going to forget the name, the committee that is following through the West Act primarily. I think it's the Natural Resources Committee. Anyhow, you'll see all their contact information because those representatives are from, all over the US. And then I also have all of our California representatives listed because Cal4Wheel being headquartered here, that's the other group of representatives that we're targeting primarily. But Gary, you might also want to reach out to representatives for your state in Ohio.
Well, I saw the names of some of the other senators from like Alaska and stuff, but I don't know if you were going too fast or I'm too slow to see the other names on there. That's why I was asking. I don't know. It seemed like West Virginia was on there too, wasn't it?
Right. Those are individuals that sit in the Natural Resources Committee.
Okay. And so does Mark Maynard have this since he's in West Virginia?
Well, he's a state representative versus a federal representative.
Yeah, I realize that, but he just seems to have, I don't know, a lot of good contacts or whatever there, and he could motivate his people in West Virginia to contact, their federal senators. That's all. So,
oh, totally agree. Well, feel free to share this with him, and when it's complete, I can also send some information to him. I'm sure this is something that he would have interest in as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, great questions, Gary. Okay, well, as we're nearing the end of our time, if y'all have any other questions or want to touch base on anything further, we can certainly do so. I know, Stephen, that we're going to try and connect over the next couple of days about this whole Prairie City issue. And then after you look through all the information on the West Act, if anybody has other questions or wants to chat further, then let's definitely get in touch.
The West Act concerns the selling of the leases type stuff also. Is that what is? I'm guessing that's part of it. Is that correct?
Yes, that's it. The West Act would be the legislative correction for the BLM's Conservation and Landscape Health Rule. Okay,
I understand that because my interest in that where they were selling the leases off. I'm more interested. Basically, what got me involved in this is the Rubicon Trail, and actually the reroute of the Rubicon Trail. I'd really like to talk to you about that and see if we could get some support there because we just got a letter that come from the big guy from the Tahoe Regional, Chris Fertier, said that they're not going to consider. They're not even going to consider the one of the proposals was to repair that portion of the trail to avoid the reroute. And so this guy that's in charge of the TPN now is kind of a new guy there. So I'm thinking that he just like what you explained, your representatives, they don't read things. They got staff that does that. And I think that that's what's, because I was reading through some of the SOPA that they deal with, and there's just a ton of them. And I think that when he got into this position in June, because this started back in 2023, and when this guy got into this position in 2025, that he just says it's been around long enough and it's all old information and didn't want to deal with it. So I'm I don't think, I'm hopeful that we don't totally lose this deal, because repairing the route is way cheaper and easier than than the reroute that they're talking about. Plus that, was it the 2477 route that the Rubicon Trail has right now on the El Dorado side? Once you move it, it's still up in the air as to whether you lose that. So anyway, our position has been to stop the reroute and just do the repair. But now this guy's saying he's not even going to consider the repair. So I'd like to talk to you a little bit about that when we have our phone conversation.
Yes, let's definitely talk about that at length. I'd love to support you with that. I have some familiarity, but I haven't been very deeply engaged. And so I think that's something that we probably need to step into now. So I'll look forward to chatting with you about that further, Stephen.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, and I put and just in case you don't have it, I put my email address in the chat too. So reach out to me and let's figure out a good time to talk.
Okay, I'll do that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, well, otherwise, thank you all for joining tonight. I'll look forward to chatting with all of you further and hope you have a great rest of your evening.
You too. Take care, Rose, Chris, Holly, Steve.
Thank you
Holly,
so
I'd
much,
like to
Rose.
talk to.
Say hi to Robin.
I'd like to talk to Ollie sometime. Is there any way that I could get in touch with Ollie?
Yeah.
Ollie, are people allowed to get in touch with you?
Yeah, you got a pencil and a paper?